We've been talking about how to step out into what you're called to, how to know if you're called, and different things like that that deal with stepping out into ministry. We've talked a little bit about how Larry and I first started out on the mission field and what it was like. But, today I just want to take some time and destroy some ministry myths. And, I think sometimes when, hey Trish, sometimes when we think about ministry, or we think about going to the mission field, or we think about doing this for God or that for God, we have the idea that if God is in it, that it's going to be, just all rosy and no problems whatsoever. And that's not always true. Oftentimes when God calls you to do stuff, things are way less than perfect. If you're waiting for the perfect time to step out into ministry, no matter what it is, whether it's cleaning the church or whether it's street ministry or nursing home ministry or whatever God's called you to do, if you're waiting for that perfect time, there's never going to be a perfect time. And if you're not careful, you could miss what God's called you to do. When we first went to the mission field, some of you have heard my story, and I see that my friend Sue Lynn is watching. Hi, Sue Lynn. Sue Lynn and her husband at the time were them and one other couple helped us move down to Mexico. And we had a little Chevy Citation, and we had sold everything that we had and purchased a sofa bed, and a queen size sofa bed, because we figured that way it's a bed, and during the daytime it's a sofa. And so we had practically nothing. I took my dishes with me, but we loaded that old sofa bed up, and I don't know whether it was either Donna Turner's van or Paul and Sue Lynn's truck, but we loaded. I took dishes. We took some of Tiffany's toys. We had a TV and a VCR because we didn't speak Spanish, so we were going to show the Jesus movie. And because we had already found out now that couple was not there at the orphanage, so we had to figure out something else that we were going to do. You see, we didn't just go back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't go. That was never an option. So we got a TV and a VCR, and we got our hands on some evangelistic films that were in Spanish. And we headed down to Mexico. And, Sue Lynn had some problems. Oh, Donna had the sofa bed in her van. And Paul and Sue Lynn had their 2 children with them. We had Tiffany. Oh, it was quite an ordeal. And you've heard the story, a funny thing happened on the way to wherever. Well, the funny thing happened on the way to Mexico. The fuel pump or water pump or something went out on the truck, and we were all just struggling, young married couples with little children. None of us had very much money, and so Larry and I really felt impressed that we should help pay for that. I'll just say, I'm going to call it a water pump. And so we did. Sue Lynn never knew how much money we did not actually have. When we got to town, the house we thought we were going to be living in was not ready. And so we had to look for somewhere else to live. And, here all along the way, you could have just said, oh, this must not be God. But no, it was God. It just wasn't perfect. And we had to just keep on with our eyes firmly fixed on what we had already settled in our hearts. And, you know, I talked to you about settling it. And so when we got to town, we had nowhere to live. We had to look for somewhere to live. And we actually sat out on the streets in Parras de la Fuente, Coahuila. And Sulyn took out her guitar, and we just started worshiping the Lord out on the streets at nearly midnight. Just the one name of the one person that we had in town, he wasn't home. And we were just kind of camped out in the streets. And so as soon as he got there, he actually knew the mayor of the small town, who was embezzling money from the town, shock, shock, and building himself a hotel. So once we, once he finally got home, we talked, he went and talked to the mayor, he got us a room at the hotel. They had cement beds, okay? Cement beds. They built like a bed frame out of cement and put a little thin mattress on it out of cotton or something. It felt like we were sleeping on cement. So we got rooms for us and for both of the other couples, and it was a Labor Day weekend. I'll never forget. We looked all weekend for a place to live. We finally found a place to live, and we went to this little restaurant to eat over on the other side of town. And when they had to leave, I stood in the parking lot of that hotel, and Larry had to lead them back out of town because they weren't really sure how to get back out of town. So he was gonna like lead them out of town. And Tiffany and I stood in that parking lot, and I watched everybody that spoke English drive away. And never knowing when in the world I was ever gonna see them again. And I stood and I watched them drive away, and that's when it got so real. We found a place to live, like I told you last time, I think it was. We rented an old, dilapidated hacienda that was over 500 years old. But the point I wanted to make this week was, you know, we were eventually arrested in Mexico for preaching the gospel and taken out at gunpoint. That's another story. But we were eventually 5 years later arrested and taken out at gunpoint. We didn't get to go back for 11 years. When we went back 11 years later, we found out some interesting stuff. Okay, let me back up just a little bit. That month we paid for the fuel, the water pump. We paid for the hotels for everybody because we really felt like that's, you know, that was the right thing to do. And no one knew that literally almost took every dime we had. We almost had no money left whatsoever. And our month was much longer than the money was going to last us. And on top of that, we didn't know that, and I can't even believe that we did this. We were so naive. God took care of us. But they mailed the money, a check to us in the mail. And that we didn't know that it was going to take 6 weeks to get a check. And so we ran out of money way before we ran out of month in the first place. And then our month was 6 weeks long. And so we went back to the restaurant that we had eaten at with the gang, and we explained to them. I mean, this was after the money didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. We had a few cents, American metal change, and other countries don't take metal money. They only take paper money. And there were some sweet men in the market who I don't know, I guess they just felt sorry for us or something, but they took our metal money, and we would go and buy a banana or buy a piece of fruit or something for Tiffany. And I had one fistful of rice left, and we had enough money to buy a banana. And after that, we had nothing. We had nothing left. And so when the money didn't come, Larry and I, we just cried. We just held each other and cried. Tiffany was standing in the doorway. We thought she was in her room playing with a few stuffed toys that we had brought, and but she was listening. And you know, she said, "Mommy, Daddy, don't cry." She was 9. She said, "It's okay. I'm not really very hungry today anyway." Oh my goodness. We could have packed up and went home then, but we didn't. Everything is not going to be perfect just because God's called you into ministry. Some days are hard. It doesn't mean that it's not God. So Larry and I decided we would go and try to talk to the men that owned the restaurant. There were 3 men who owned the restaurant that we had eaten at with the gang when they helped us move down. And we told them that we were expecting our check any day, and could we please eat on credit. We ate on credit, and we even took the Jesus movie, and they let us put it in their TV, because all the restaurants have TVs because you have to watch soccer. So they let us put it in the VCR and play the Jesus movie at the restaurant. We passed out tracts. We couldn't even speak Spanish. We just pointed to the prayer on the back of the track and said, you know, pray this prayer. And so now fast forward. Well, of course, our check eventually came. And but fast forward 11 years, we got kicked out for preaching the gospel, arrested at gunpoint, hauled through the desert. They tried to kill us numerous times. God didn't let them. We got to go back 11 years later, and we found out that the 3 men that owned the restaurant, because of the Jesus movie, because of the tract, they accepted Jesus in their hearts, and they were serving the Lord in the church that we built. They all died of AIDS, but they served the Lord all of their days, and it was because we ran out of food. God doesn't do things like we do things. So you just put your big girl panties on, put your big boy panties on. Well, boys don't wear panties. Put your big boy boxers on, and settle it in your heart. No, it doesn't have to be perfect to mean that it's God. And you do what God's called you to do. This has been the Missionary Minute for this Monday. I love you guys. I hope it ministers to someone.